All right, so in the last lecture, we got into the nitty-gritty of the biochemistry that's going on when you have a stress response. So we talked a lot about the activation of adrenaline and cortisol inside the body. We're going to back out now, and we're going to talk about some of the ways that you can think about stress and that can help de-stress stress. And this has to do with your mindset. So, mindset science is actually a field, and it is a field that deals with your mindset and how the collection of your thoughts and beliefs can shape your thought about your habits and how that actually affects your biology. So, how you think and feel and what you do will actually impact many aspects of your life, from your happiness to your ability to learn, and yes, even your ability to handle and utilize stress to your benefit. So, it can make a big difference in the case of your health span. So, I first want to talk about growth mindsets and learning. So, over 30 years ago, Carol Dweck and her colleagues became very interested in students' attitudes about failure. And what they noticed is that some students rebounded while other students seemed devastated by even the smallest setbacks, a bad grade on a test. So, after studying the behavior of thousands of children, Dr. Dweck coined the terms of fixed mindsets and growth mindsets to describe these underlying beliefs that people have about learning and intelligence. So, when students believe that they can get smarter, they understand that effort makes them stronger. Therefore, they put in extra time and effort, and that actually leads to higher achievement. This is known as a growth mindset, thinking, I can get smarter, effort makes me stronger, so if I spend more time and work harder, I'm going to have higher achievement level. So whatever your learning goal is going to be, if you put a growth mindset to that, it's going to drive more motivation and lead you to higher achievement. For example, seventh graders who were taught that intelligence is malleable and shown how the brain grows with effort showed a clear increase in their math grades over controls who were not taught that the brain can grow with effort. In addition to your grades, your mindset can also affect your physiology. It can affect the actual biology inside your body. So there's a research article called Mindset Matters, Exercise and the Placebo Effect. Does anybody know what a placebo is? Of course, if we were in person, you would give me that answer. A placebo is usually evaluated as your control group. The response at the control group that doesn't receive the treatment is the placebo effect or the placebo group, right? So it is kind of the body's natural tendency to have an effect without any medicine, or in this case, without exercise, right? So this is also known as the housekeeper study. And so in this study, what they were trying to show is the effect you expect is the effect that you get. So each of 7 hotels was randomly assigned to one of 2 conditions, the informed condition or the control condition. So all of the subjects were told that the purpose of the study was to find ways to improve the health and happiness of women in a hotel workplace. So each subject was given a questionnaire. So while the subjects were filling it out, they were each taken one at a time, kind of interrupted from the questionnaire, into another room where they completed their physiological measures as well, like blood pressure and things like that. So then they went and finished their questionnaires. And then the informed group, this was the experimental group, right, was given the information about how their work at the hotel is actually good exercise. This information was conveyed in the form of a verbal presentation, And they also received individual handouts and on larger posters that were actually tacked to the bulletin boards in their lounges at their workplaces. And this was in the hope that they would be reminded of how much exercise they were actually getting each day as they were doing their work in the hotel cleaning the rooms. So the control group took the questionnaire and they had their measurements made on their physiological condition at the start of the experiment, but they were not given this mindset lecture, right? So they were not told that their job was actually a lot of exercise and that they were getting all this exercise while they were working. So that was the difference between the two groups. One was told this, one was not, but their work effort and things were the same at each job. So 4 weeks later, then, they returned to take the same measures, and all subjects were debriefed both orally and writing, and each session took approximately an hour. So this is what the informed group were told. They were told that exercise does not need to be hard or painful to be good for one's health, but that it's a simple matter of moving one's muscles and burning calories. So they were told that accumulating approximately 200 calories per day would meet the recommendations and guidelines for physical activity. They were also given specific details of the average calorie expenditure for various activities that they were doing at work. For example, they were told changing linens for 15 minutes burns about 40 calories, or vacuuming for 15 minutes burns about 50 calories, cleaning bathrooms 60 calories, and so on. And they were also told that although these figures were based on results for a 140-pound woman, and each of them would burn calories at a different rate, that it was clear that they were easily meeting and even exceeding the Surgeon General's recommendations for exercise based on the work that they were doing at the hotel. So not having additional exercise at all. This was in comparison to the control group. The subjects that were in the control group were given all the same information as those in the informed group, except they did not receive information about how their work is good exercise until after the second set of measurements was taken. Then they were given that information as well, because as we'll see, there was benefit to the informed group. So for this study, there were 84 subjects that completed both sets of measurements. 44 were in the informed group and 40 in the control group. The age ranges were from 18 to 55 years, so that's kind of broad. Most were Hispanic, although some were Caucasian, African American, and Asian. And all worked between 32 and 40 hours per week and cleaned approximately 15 rooms per day. So they tried to have both groups working about the same load. The statistical analysis revealed that at the end of the onset of the investigation, that the groups did not differ significantly except in age, right? So they had relatively same like body mass index, things like that. So they looked at weight and percent body fat. They looked at body mass index. They looked at waist to hip ratio and at blood pressure. So they did this before the start of the experiment and then a month later. So a month is not a huge amount of time for anybody that's ever like tried to lose weight or do things like that. A month is actually not that big a time to make huge impact. So behavioral measures then, they tried to evaluate if the people in the experiment had changes in exercise outside of work. They were assessed for substance abuse. So they were excluded if they if they consumed a lot of alcohol or did recreational drugs. They were excluded if they smoked. They were evaluated for diet and nutrition and their consumption of caffeinated beverages and the amount of water that they drink per day. So when you're doing experiments with the human population, it's a lot different than doing experiments with like laboratory animals like rats or mice, right? Because you can control everything the rats and mice are doing, except for that experimental condition that you want to test. But with humans, we're very varied and it's difficult to control us. We aren't very compliant for doing things. We might lie, not really purposefully, but we may minimize like how much we do different things or how much caffeine we drink every day or things like that. So experiments with humans can need to be really large and kind of repeated over and over to really show changes and differences. So when you're reading these types of studies, just keep that in mind, like that, if there is a big difference or showing, big change, that might be really indicative of something, but it could also be something else that's causing that change. So you have to be careful. So, but here are some of the data that came from this study from the informed and the control group. So their mean weight dropped in the informed group versus the control group didn't have that much weight change, right? And so this was about like 2 pounds, which is still significant when it comes to a month-long study. It would be interesting to see if they had done a longer study, if that would have resulted in a bigger change. You can see the BMI also dropped in people that were in the informed group. Percent body fat also dropped, where you saw a slight increase in the control group. The hip to waist ratio had a drop. Systolic blood pressure had a drop. Diastolic blood pressure, though, did not see that big of difference between the two groups. So on a lot of these indicators, though, the informed group is doing better, right? Just by the knowledge that their work is exercise. So one interpretation then of these results regarding the relationship between increased perceived exercise and improved health would be that they were mediated by a change in behavior. But the data in this study don't support this conclusion, right? As mentioned, the room attendants did not report any increase in outside exercise after work, nor did they experience any increase in workload over the course of the study. So the only major difference was that they were told that their work was actual exercise. So that's pretty cool. This suggests that mindset is having a real effect on the physiological health of these participants. So a second study that I'd like to tell you about is the milkshake study. So this study was to test whether the physiological satiation, which is measured by the gut peptide ghrelin, may vary depending on the mindset in which one approaches the consumption of food. So this is very interesting, right? So on 2 separate occasions, participants, 46 of them, consumed a 380 calorie milkshake under the pretense that they were either having a health shake that was only 140 calories or they were having a dessert shake that was 620 calories. In reality, it was the same milkshake in both of these, and in reality, it had 380 calories. So the number of calories is the same in both, but the participants are being lied to. Some of them think they're having a dessert shake that is calorie dense. Others are having a health shake that is calorie light. So they did this measurement with this hormone called ghrelin, which is measured via intravenous blood samples at 3 time points. So they did a baseline after the participants had just been hanging out for 20 minutes. And then they told them about the shake that they were going to be getting, and they let them sit there for 40 more minutes. So they took another sample at 60 minutes, and then they let them consume the shake. And then at 90 minutes post-consumption, they took another baseline of ghrelin. So what is ghrelin? So ghrelin and leptin hormones are involved in the feeling of hunger or the feeling of feeling full or satiated, right? And so before eating, ghrelin is actually produced by the cells in the gastrointestinal tract and will be very high, and leptin will be very low, which is produced in adipose tissue, right? So ghrelin is going to be the big boy here tipping the scales, right? And this is making the stomach growl and telling you that you are hungry and you want food, right? So this is anticipating before eating, you get hungry, and you want food. After you eat, you have a feeling of being satiated and full. And that's because leptin is a hormone that's made by the adipose tissue or fat cells inside the body. And when it's making this leptin, this gives you the feeling of being full or satiated. And so leptin is tipping the scale here, and ghrelin is no longer being produced by the stomach. The stomach's happy, right? So this is this balance between ghrelin and leptin. And so what this study is testing is, can your mind affect the balance of these hormones just by thinking that you've eaten a health shake or you've eaten a dessert shake that has a lot of calories? So remember, both groups are getting the same milkshake, but one group was given this information after they did their baseline. And so they were sitting around thinking about this, that they were going to get this indulgence, decadence you deserve shake that had 620 calories in it, 270 from fat. So 30 grams of fat, 18 saturated grams, right? Very dense, smooth, rich, and delicious. It really only has 380 calories total, right? The other group, though, was told it was a Sensi shake, that it was guilt-free satisfaction, 0% fat, zero added sugar, and only 140 calories. So this is telling them that the Sensi shake is light and tasty enough to enjoy every day. So the respondents were given a questionnaire about their shake, about their perceived healthiness of it, and the people that were told it was the Sensi shake had a high perception that it was pretty healthy for them, whereas the people who had the indulgent one knew that it wasn't very healthy for them, but it was going to be tasty. So then they did this experiment with ghrelin over time as a function of the shake mindset. And so what you see is the people that were told that it was an indulgent shake and had 620 calories. This was the baseline ghrelin, and you can see the baseline didn't differ between the two groups. This was when they were given the information about the shake. So overall, what you see is that both groups start at the same levels of ghrelin, but the ones that thought they were getting the indulgent shake have much greater ghrelin accumulation before they get to eat the shake, which means that they are feeling more hungry before they eat their indulgent shake. And then afterwards, you can see that there is a more dramatic drop in ghrelin, which means that they feel fuller and more satiated after the indulgent shake. However, you can see the group that thought they were getting the Sensi shake did not have as big a rise in ghrelin before they got to eat the shake. They didn't think that it was going to be very satisfying. And in fact, it wasn't very satisfying, and they still felt hungry, after they had the shake. So it wasn't very satiating either. And recall that the shakes were exactly the same. They had the same calorie density, fat density, all of the biological components of it were exactly the same. The only thing that was different was the mindset. So if you think there's a lot of fat in it, it's going to make your body think there's more fat in it. And it's going to make you feel fuller and satiated. That's pretty crazy, isn't it? Okay, so attitudes and social cognition can also make a difference. So what this study shows is that longevity is increased by positive self-perceptions of aging. So if you think of the aging process in a good way, in positive light, this can actually help increase your own longevity. So what they did is they followed cohorts, right, over time, and they did questionnaires, and those people that had high positive self-perception of aging show an increase in 7.5 years survival over those people that had a low self-perception of aging. So this is more than the gain seen with exercise and not smoking. So this is just the attitude difference between these two groups. So as a cohort study, they actually followed this group of individuals for a very long time, so over a 22-year period. So what we're finding is that beliefs actually really matter. So this study is showing, does the perception that stress affects health matter? And is there an association with health and mortality? So in this study, they found that high amounts of stress and the perception that stress impacts health are associated with poor health and mental health. So individuals who perceived that the stress affects their health and reported that they had a large amount of stress had an increased risk of premature death. So note what that says, right? So even if you have a large amount of stress in your life, if you don't perceive that that stress is going to affect your health, it will have less of an impact than somebody who thinks that it's going to impact their health negatively. So am I doing you a disservice telling you that having high stress levels can impact all of these different diseases? Well, I'm also telling you this, that your mindset also has a big impact on what happens with your body. So your mindset around stress needs to be modified. So it turns out if you view the stress as a challenge event rather than as a harmful event, then the stress can have a positive effect on you rather than a negative health impact. So in fact, moderate stress actually has a strengthening capability, right? So we need some amount of stress to actually be in our healthiest zone. So some stress is strengthening, and then if you have too much chronic stress and it's too overburdening, that's when you get the weakening from the stress, and this can be in the red zone and have health impacts. So there is diversity in the effects of stress. So we actually see that people that don't have any stress in their life will have worse health outcomes than people that do have stress but view it in a positive light. So this has also been confirmed in animal studies as well. So we all remember Hans Selye's rats that got ulcers and had weakened immune systems and suffered all these ill effects from the chronic stress that they were under. Well, so here's a story about what moderate levels of stress rather than extreme stress can do. So this was a stress inoculation study that was done with squirrel monkeys that were between the ages of 17 and 27 weeks of age, so very young. They were essentially like juveniles. So they were either separated from their mother when they were exposed to the stressful event or stress inoculation, or they were exposed to the stressor with access to their mother. And they did 10 one-hour stress inoculation sessions. So this is kind of a schematic then of the treatment timeline. So there were undisturbed social groups that served as a control. And then there were juveniles between 17 and 27 weeks old that had these treatment conditions or the stress inoculations. And so between this period, they did 10 sessions under one of 5 treatment conditions that had varying stress elements. And the subjects were then assessed 10 weeks later and at 37 weeks of age for any behavioral or neuroendocrine indications of resilience. So here are the 5 different conditions that they could have been in. They could have been in the control group and they had no stress inoculations. So they were not separated from their natal group or their mother. And there was no injection pre-treatment. So there was 0 number of early life stressors. This is our control group. They could have gotten their stress inoculation with their mom present, but they were separated from the natal group for the stress inoculation, but mom was still present, so they weren't separated for their mom, and they had no injection pre-treatment. So the number of early life stressors then was given as 1 because they were only separated from the natal group for that treatment. They could have had a stress inoculation when they were separated from their mother and from their natal group. So you're kind of all on your own, right? But there was no pre-injection treatment. So the number of stressors here for each of these treatments, right, is 2 because they're separated from the natal group and they're separated from their mother. And then they had a treatment with an anti-anxiety drug, which is this lower one, or vehicle alone, which is saline solution injection. So this anti-anxiety drug should supposedly calm your nerves, right, when you're going through a stressful event, right? So, but getting the shot itself is stressful, right? So they had to give a shot to a control group that also had separation from the natal group and separation from the mother, and then plus or minus the drug. So they had 3 stressors going into each inoculation. And then each thing was done 10 times for an hour at a time. They were exposed to new situations, which are stressful. So the new situations, though, weren't harmful to them. Like they may just be put in a new place where they have to explore like a new area all by themselves or with their mother present, that kind of thing. So the stress is moderate. It's not extreme. They weren't like placed in extreme cold or any of that type of stuff that Hans Selye was studying. So this graph is dense. It's got all of those 5 trials in different colors. So this was an example of maternal clinging when the monkeys were placed in a novel environment. And this is after the groups had gone through 1 stressful event, 2 stressful events, 3 stressful events, 4 or 5 episodes. Right? And then there's the 5 different conditions for each of these, right? So you had naive monkeys that had no stress inoculations. You had the stress inoculations with mom present or without mom, and then plus the anti-anxiety drug or with the shot. And you're not in your group and you're not with your mom. This is a measure of maternal clinging when those monkeys are now in that novel environment, or free to explore. And so what you see over time is that the monkeys that either had the stress inoculation with their mom present or without their mom did better with the maternal clinging. They didn't actually have as much maternal clinging as the other monkeys, and they were more free to explore that novel environment. So the early stress events in their lives gave them better security and curiosity for being able to go out into a novel environment and explore. Interestingly, though, when you add the shot in, the shot's a painful thing, right? You get a recurrence of maternal clinging. Right? And the anti-anxiety drug didn't help at all. So the maternal clinging for these 2 groups doesn't show any difference to the monkey that didn't have any stressful inoculations. Interesting, huh? So this is a measure of the exploration in the novel environments. And again, you see the most increases with the monkey groups that actually had the stress inoculations. So if they had 5 stress inoculations prior to this test, an exploration with novel environments, they had much higher likelihood of exploring that novel environment versus the control monkeys that had never been separated from their groups or their mothers. And this included, in this case, those ones that had the shot and also had the anti-anxiety medication. Now we look at cortisol concentrations, right? So in stressful events, right, cortisol is going to go up. Your fight or flight response gets activated, right? So these are the baseline with the ones that had stress inoculation versus the first and the 5th environmental test session, right, in these measurements. And so what you see here is the ones that had the least cortisol present were the monkeys that had experienced the stress inoculation with their mom present. So they had the safety of mom being there when they had those first inoculations. and you can see that they had much less stress level than all of the other monkey groups. That's pretty interesting. So if you have a little bit of stress and novelty going on, but mom is there to give you encouragement and knowing that you feel safe, you have less of a stress response than if you're on your own by yourself, right? Although if you have more stress inoculations, even on your own, your cortisol levels start to go down and you get a little bit more comfortable in those novel environment test sessions. So the conclusions from this is that monkeys that have moderate stress, either in the presence or absence of their mothers, show more confidence, they're less clingy, and they're more explorative. So moderate stress can have a positive impact on individuals. So again, this shows some of those diverse effects of stress. Moderate stress can have a strengthening capability in our lives and be an important component to who we are. So how you think about stress actually makes a difference at how that stress is going to affect your health over time as well. So viewing stress as a helpful part of life rather than as harmful is associated with better health, better emotional well-being, and productivity at work, even during periods where you have high stress levels going on. So mindset is very important. So when you have good stress in your life, this is called eustress. And so how can stress be good? If you feel like you're in a safe environment, people actually like to feel stress in their life. They like to feel that adrenaline rush, right? That's what roller coasters are all about. You're safely buckled in and you're going on a fun ride, right? So if you can view some of those stressful events in your life more like the roller coaster and having fun and learning from that experience, and that it's a positive event, you're going to experience it more like you would experience that safe roller coaster ride. So stress can be positive in that it can lead you to facing challenges and allowing us to grow. So going through it to arrive at a meaningful place can actually give your life purpose, and going through stress makes you better at it. So like the monkey trials showed us, many professions practice it. Think about NASA astronauts, for example, or professional athletes, or athletes on any team for that matter, EMTs and doctors. Oftentimes, we need to know how to deal with stress to make it work for us, right? So practicing being in that stressful environment in a safe place first will make you better when that stressor actually happens for real. So it can help you with traveling. So facing international flights, customs, new languages and places, these are all stressful things. Life changes happen, marriage, new jobs, college, all of these things can be very stressful, but also very positive and happy. New hobbies, it's stressful to start developing new skills, right? Like you're in a class for the first time and you feel like a dork and you don't know what you're doing. That can be pretty daunting if you're in a class where everybody else knows what's going on. But being able to get through that and try those new things, you can also develop and learn those skills and become better at it. So this study looks at purpose in life as a predictor of mortality across adulthood. So we're going to see that purpose and feeling a sense of purpose will predict greater longevity in adulthood and also greater health span. So the benefits of purpose cannot be well explained by typical indicators of psychological and affective well-being. So this underscores the unique role that purpose may play in this process. Endorsing a strong purpose in life continues to have meaningful reductions in the risk of dying. And maintaining a stronger purpose in life can be equally important during younger ages as much as it is in older ages. The benefits of purpose are not conditional on retirement status either. So maintaining purpose in your life even after you retire is very important. And what brings you purpose and what brings you joy can vary throughout your life. Maybe at one stage it's about your job, maybe about another stage it's about your family or being there as a caregiver or whatever you're doing in your life that is contributing to a larger goal or goodness that's out there. This study showed that there's an association between life purpose and mortality among U.S. older adults that are older than 50 years. So, this again was a cohort study and it went out 70 months, which is what, a little over 5 years. So, this study's results indicated that stronger purpose in life was associated with decreased mortality, right? So, this is the life purpose score, right? So the yellow up here and then decreasing over time the lowest amount of purpose. So purposeful living may also have health benefits, but that doesn't mean that it's without stress. So sometimes like a purposeful event or the purpose that you have in your life may put you in situations where you actually are experiencing stress. For example, if you're a medical doctor and the purpose that you feel in your life is to help other people, you're going to be in situations that are definitely stressful, where somebody's life is on the line and you're trying to help them through a medical emergency. That's extremely stressful. So purpose and stress are not necessarily opposing each other. They may go together, and you may have stress to have a meaningful life. So that's our first paradox. If you have a meaningful life, you'll also have stress in your life, right? So there will be some stress in there. So again, that stress can be on that top curve, and it can have a positive impact on you if it brings meaning into your life and if you see it as a challenge rather than something that is gripping you and defeating you. So what's the difference then between a happy life and a meaningful life? Right? Because purpose doesn't necessarily mean that you're happy, or having a meaningful life doesn't necessarily mean the same thing as being happy. So what you see when people rated happiness and meaningfulness based on things like how many positive events have been associated with them, you'll see that happiness is positively correlated with the positive events, which you'd expect. Meaningfulness is also associated with positive events, right? So positive events are often very meaningful to us. The birth of a child, for example, might be extremely meaningful and also very positive or happy. Negative events, though, are generally not associated with happiness, and so you see negative correlation here that's statistically significant. But interestingly, some of the negative events have meaning for us as well. And so there's actually a positive correlation with negative events and meaningfulness as well. And then when you look at stress, happiness generally is not correlated with the sensation of stress, but meaningfulness often is. You might say, wow, that was really hard, difficult to get through. I had a lot of stress, but then I did it and I graduated from college, right? Very meaningful moment in your life. The time spent worrying can be associated with meaningfulness, generally not with your happiness score. And then when you reflect on struggles and challenges, this is generally not correlated with your happiness level, but can be correlated with meaningfulness. Similarly, with the time that you expect to be doing deep thinking, this often occurs and is associated with meaningfulness, but not really correlated with happiness. And the time spent deep thinking is slightly correlated with meaningfulness in a positive way. So those are some key differences between happiness and meaningfulness that maybe you hadn't thought about before in the association with your life. So again, the key point here is that stress isn't necessarily bad in your life, and it can contribute in positive ways to your overall feelings of meaningfulness and bringing good things into your life because you took a chance, to have some moderate stress in your life to bring you that meaning. So, our take home message, it's not the stress that kills us, it's our reaction to it. And that was from Hans Selye. So, let's really rethink our positive mindset, right? Rethink stress. What brings meaning into your life? You might sit down and try to list your most meaningful roles, relationships, activities, and goals. And we'll do some exercises around this kind of value development either this week or next week in class. So you want to think about like what parts of your life are you most likely to feel love, laughter, joy, learning, and a sense of purpose. They may not all be at the same time, and some of those things might overlap. And when you have a few items listed, also think about them in relation to stress, right? How many of them can you describe as sometimes or often stressful, but stressful in a way that helps bring meaning into your life? So, this is really a good exercise to do to really try to change your own mindset. All right, and that's where we're going to leave things this week. You do have another documentary that you're going to be listening to this week on the placebo effect. And we'll have a little bit more discussion about that in the next week to come as well. Great. So have a great weekend and enjoy developing a more positive mindset.